Charlie?
Yes, there is.
I forgot to ask you, were you able to put up the other handouts that go for afterwards?
Yes, they'll come up
Okay.
at the end. Yes.
Okay, great. I just forgot to check on that. Thanks.
Oh, no problem. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started with this afternoon's webinar. I apologize for the delay. We were trying to work out a last-minute technical issue, but we're good to go now. So thank you all for joining us. My name's Charlie Taylor. I'm one of the CE consultants here at KDLA. I'll just sort of be facilitating some behind-the-scenes stuff. Also joined by Krista. Go ahead and say.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. It's Krista King Oaks, Youth Services Consultant at KDLA.
All right, and Krista's going to be helping out as well. So let's see, I'm going to go ahead and change our screen over to our presentation slides for today. And we'll go ahead and get started. There it goes. Just make an adjustment here. Okay, our presenter for today is Saroj Ghoting. Would you like to say a little bit about Saroj?
Yeah, Saroj is a nationally renowned expert on best practices around early literacy and early literacy services and programs for public libraries. She was an original author and creator behind ALA's Every Child Ready to Read campaign. And we were fortunate to have a great history here in the state of Kentucky with Saroj. For those of you that have been in the public library field in Kentucky for some time, you will remember her as a presenter at one of the original Widening Circles Youth Services conferences. And then in late 2015, sort of I call it a Christmas present, we were able to bring Saroj back to Kentucky for a series of 8 face-to-face workshops called Story Times for Everyone. So today, it's a little more than a year later, we have a great opportunity thanks to our grant funding through the Institute for Museum and Library Services to bring Saroj back for kind of a review and refresher of some of that same content that was presented in those face-to-face workshops, all in service of our School Ready Libraries program. Again, that is a 3-year grant with KDLA to help build greater skills and abilities in all public library staff around their knowledge of early childhood development so that we can improve the kindergarten and school readiness skills of all students across the Commonwealth. So for those of you, hopefully you are familiar, if you're in today's webinar, you're already familiar with the School Ready Libraries project. But if not, please go ahead and visit our website. You can access the KDLA School Ready Libraries website by visiting kdla.ky.gov, going under libraries and librarians, and then library programs. It can also be accessed off of the Youth Services website. We have a lot of information on that page. There's lots of different moving parts that are associated with this project. The webinar series this month is just one piece of that. We also do what we call School Ready Libraries Link Up monthly that introduce you to different partners across the state to promote other health and school readiness initiatives as well as best practices from your fellow public librarians. And then we also have the Early Childhood Development modules that are being developed in partnership with the University of Kentucky's Human Development Institute. We recently transitioned the very first module on cognitive development to a much better website hosted at the University of Kentucky. So that is open. If you have not taken that course already, it is free and does count towards continuing education hours. It is self-paced, so you can go through at your own ease, and then hopefully within the next week, and then by the end of the month, we will have modules 2 and 3 released as well. And so with that, I am going to go ahead and turn over today's today's webinar show to Saroj. Saroj, are you with us?
Yes, indeed. Can you all hear me?
Yes, coming through loud and clear.
Okay, good. All right. Well, the first thing I thought, well, first of all, welcome. I'm so glad you all are here. I really appreciate your taking the time to join, and I hope that this will be a valuable hour for you. And one of the things that I thought might help make it more so is if I hear from you about the topics that you feel you would like to learn most about. I heard from Krista, of course, who kind of pulled together comments from the people who had participated in the Story Times for Everyone training, and the biggest hurdle seemed to be the early literacy tips or asides. So that's mainly what we're going to be concentrating on today. But if there are any other either aspects of the early literacy tips or any other topics that you would like to see addressed, I wondered if you could just type them in here on this little short answer poll that Charlie has put up. So you won't, how do they do it? They won't type it in the chat. They'll type it right on the screen, Charlie?
Correct. So in
Okay.
the pod that opens, it says type your answer here. There's a box there. You just type your answer and click enter, and it'll come up in the answer box just underneath it, and we'll all see everybody's answers. So if you guys have any other topics you want Saroj to address, go ahead and enter that in that that blank white box.
And don't be shy either. So there's no right or wrong answer.
Not too big or too small.
Yeah, nothing too big or too small. So we are here. This is, again, a really, I want to stress how unique of an opportunity this is today to be able to have Saroj with us and to really be able to lean into her years of wisdom and expertise on this subject. So please ask away. We'll give you a few seconds to type into the box. I'll just kind of, Saroj, I'll just kind of read some things as they are coming across the box. So, again, the question was, are there any other topics you want to address in addition to incorporating early literacy asides into story time? So far, these are kind of the same. One is different ways of saying something very similar. One, seeing new early literacy programs at top libraries across the country, and then your opinion on interesting trends you are seeing in public library story time. So yes, always looking for the best new and popular trends, and kind of on the same token, I also like to see things that maybe haven't worked so well, maybe why they haven't been as successful. We've got another submission in. This comment, when we have a story time of no more than 5 people in attendance, how do we mention the aside to those persons? It's a great question. Half the time, parents and caregivers just want to hear the story and song and leave. So yes, that is a common theme here. Some programs, absolutely. And again, this is an interesting approach too. How to approach resistance, I guess, or maybe confusion from management who still don't understand the importance. So those last two there. Yes, how to reach the parents and caregivers, as well as how to advocate for resources from library leadership. So those are two very, very valuable and critical issues that I hope we will address through today's webinar.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. If I move ahead.
Yeah. Did another
there's one more. Okay. Fantastic.
Program called Arts in Play, and how that may play into what we're talking about today. Oh, yes, wonderful.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I did something similar when I was back in library land. We call it preschool play art. So that was, one of my favorite programs. So we can definitely talk about that as well. I think regardless of kind of maybe the content or what your story times look like, I think you can still incorporate early literacy tips into all of those.
Right. Okay, so I think I would like to start with that one where we have no more than 5 people in attendance, and how do we mention the sides to those people, and half the time they just want to hear the story and song and leave. That's certainly a challenge, especially when you have a small group like that, and I'm guessing maybe, they might be regulars or the families perhaps. I think a great way to start out is with what are the children doing. Parents usually like to, or the grandparent, whoever's there with them, usually they like to talk about their kids, or they like to tell you things that they're doing, that kind of thing. So kind of starting out with what the children are doing might be a good way to kind of throw that in there. So just maybe, for example, I might even put out either before or after a few toys that they might play with. And then you talk about, oh, look how he's doing the puzzle. That really helps, having to turn those pieces around to figure out how to fit them. That also is going to help them learn their letters because, the orientation of the letter makes a difference in the letter itself. Like, for instance, an N and a Z, because the position of the graphic makes a difference. So when they're turning those puzzle pieces around, that also is going to help them with their letter knowledge. So sometimes you might be able to start with things, oh, look how the children are just joining in with this repeated phrase, or, hopefully the adults are too, maybe if you can get them to do that. That helps them learn how stories work, and that's going to make it easier for them to understand stories when they are reading them. Or maybe, let's see, well, you said they like to do the songs, so of course songs help with hearing the smaller sounds in words. So I would just kind of go more by kind of feeling joyful about what the children are doing and then build on that. So
that's a fantastic tip.
That would
really
be
like
my
that.
recommendation there. Sorry, I went over you. What was that, Krista?
Oh, I was just saying that's a fantastic tip. I really like the idea of keeping it casual and being kind of present in the moment with the child and the parent, and being joyful. That's a really nice way to say that.
Oh, good. Okay. So that I think would be my main. I think it's harder in a very small group because it feels like almost too immediate. But I think when we concentrate first on the child, then everybody's there for the kids really. So it's nice to see if you can start out with something that the children are doing or that you're doing with the children. Even something like when you're explaining a word in a book, you're explaining it, like, and then you have the children repeat that new word. You could say, oh, look how smart your kids are. They're, repeating this long word or something like that, So you just kind of like build on what they're doing, which is, they might know that word, brachiosaurus or something, or they know an interesting fact about something in the book. That would be good. And I think also using factual books with factual information, which you don't have to read from cover to cover, but, if children are really interested in bears or snakes or, whatever it might be, they often know more about those things than we even realize they know. So they enjoy kind of popping up with information about that topic, and then that's another great way to say, oh, look at how smart your children are with knowing so much information about the world. That's going to later help them understand what they read, and the more information you can share with them about things that that's going to help them as well. So don't protect them from everything share all that knowledge even if they don't necessarily understand it right now. So that's what I do, just kind of build on what they're doing. In terms of, let's see, arts and play. Play is actually, I was going to bring that up as one of the new early literacy programs across the country. It's not so much like a nationwide program, but I do see a lot more emphasis on play, either in as part of story time itself or having like play to learn time, like a kind of the way somebody here is having arts and play. Then also, there's like a play to learn time or, that kind of thing, which is not even attached to a story time. It's just a separate program. So that would be another, either a trend, and certainly, learning through play, through block play. There's lots of resources nowadays about relating those activities both to STEM and to early literacy. So if you want some more resources on that, like a book list or that kind of thing, or a couple of websites, I can get those to Krista if you would like those after the program, after the webinar. Let's see. In terms of new early literacy programs across the country, STEM into story times, the introduction of coding, like when you code computers, coding activities in particular as part of STEM. Those are things like sequencing, left, right, up, down, those kinds of spatial relationships. So lots of different kind of early or pre-coding kinds of way of thinking of things that we already do, but just thinking of it more in terms of future computer software programming. Supercharged Story Times, which is based on Views 2, the University of Washington study that has just kind of rolled out now, Supercharged Story Times, which emphasizes interactivity, intentionality, and community of practice as part of their research. So I would say that's just now kind of picking up. So those are some of the things I've noticed. In terms of the management aspect, it would help to know a little bit more about what is the resistance based on, and what are you? I'm not quite sure. Is it just too many other things going on? Is it they don't get the connection to later reading? Is it that education just isn't that big of a priority in the library there? Or so it would kind of help to know a little bit more about what the resistance is about.
Yeah, and that's something we can address too with at the end of today's webinar if we have time for more questions. And something I always like to stress too, something that we're seeing as a new trend in our state is library services in support of workforce development and college and career readiness. And I always like to talk to library leadership about how, that starts at the earliest years of life.
Right.
And so support for early literacy services, early childhood, really K-12 services in general, if we give them a great start early in life, then we will have a well-developed, well-educated workforce. So
okay. Yeah, that's good.
Consider and keep
and
in
maybe
mind.
Whoever wrote that can put in the chat box or something, a little more detail, and then at the end we can address that a little bit further.
Absolutely.
Because I think that's really important. Yeah. Okay, we'll move on now to our next poll, which is, have you tried to incorporate early literacy tips in your story times yet? And you were able to do that poll earlier, but if you did not get to do it, maybe you could just go ahead and click now on the one that's up here on the screen. Give you a minute or so there. We have 31 people, I think. I don't know if everybody came, but let's see how.
Wow, no, that's fantastic. Yeah, that's how many we had signed up, so looks like almost everyone.
Okay, so looks about 2/3 or a little bit more have tried those tips, and about 1/3 have not tried them yet. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. So here I'm going to ask you what feels hard about incorporating these tips. So even if you've already done them and tried them and it still feels like a bit of a challenge, here are some options about what might be feeling difficult. If you did not if you didn't try them yet, but you want to identify what's going to feel hard or why you haven't tried them yet, that would be great. The ones number 3 and number 4, I can't figure out what to say because I can't make the connection to early literacy. And number 4, I know the connection to early literacy myself, but I can't figure out what to say. So the difference in those two, I'm going to give you a little example. Like, for example, let's say you had rhyming and you didn't know really the connection, how that makes a difference for early literacy. which is to help children hear the smaller sounds in words, which is going to later help them sound out words. So if you can't figure out the connection between some of the activities or the books or whatever it is in story time, if you can't figure it out yourself, that would be number 3. Number 4 is, I know what the connection is, but I just don't know how to say it. I don't know how to get it out, to make it understandable to the other people. So that's a difference. And you can check more than one thing here. You don't have to check only one. If you want to check more than one, that's okay.
And remember, if you selected other, to please describe that in the chat box. And again, there's no right or wrong answer. I hope nobody is upset by seeing names there on the screen. There's no reflection on anyone individually. So this is all why we're here today, is to share and to learn from one another.
Yes. Thank you, Krista. Thank you for bringing that up. That's, I hope people will feel free, because that's how we learn. Okay, so here we have the rolling off the tongue and kind of actually figuring out what, kind of how to get it out in the first place, and then have it be a little bit more, what would you say? Just be a little more of a comfort level. And I hate to tell you this, guys, but the best way to do that is by practicing, and that just means doing it more and more. The part about, can't really figure out what to say. So if you know the connection, such as rhyming helps with, that sounding out the words, then I'm hoping that in today's webinar, we're going to look at the when we format. So I'm hoping that's something that I've developed since our training, frankly, at the suggestion of a librarian in Minnesota. So I've kind of gone into more depth on that, and I'm just gonna, offer that to you as an option, and hopefully that will make it, that will make the connection. That will help with, it won't feel as preachy, because it's like when we do such and such, this helps our children with whatever. So it just kind of makes it a little bit more, more conversational, I would say. Okay.
I'm going to jump in with some of the comments that we're getting through the chat box.
Yeah, thank you, because they scroll away fast.
Yeah. Amanda said that she often has a story time with the very youngest children, and sometimes it's just the loudness in the room. It's hard to talk over them. So I completely sympathize with that, and that's just like you say, you're just doing your best with that. Janet, she offered an interesting insight. She said, it seems to me the parents and caregivers who take the time to attend story time are already aware or intuitively know these skills. The folks that need to hear the asides more might be in an outreach situation where the parents and family are not present. Do you have any feedback about that, Saroj?
Yeah, I think the one thing that's about that is that I think that even though parents come to the story time, and as you say, they kind of intuit it, but I think when we actually say the tip, it actually helps them kind of, it gels it for them, and they kind of get a parenting pat on the back, I always feel like, how often does a parent get a pat on the back for, for something related to parenting? Like, hardly ever. So if they come to story time and they hear a tip and they're already, singing with their children, and then they hear that, helps children, hear the smaller sounds and words, and that's going to later help them sound out words when they learn to read. So let's say they already knew that. Well, they got a pat on the back just from being, kind of, just from knowing that they're doing it. And then the parents who don't do it or didn't know about the connection, they learn it. So I think it's okay to, if they hear something that they already kind of get affirmed on, I think that's fine. I think in addition, for sure, we should be doing these, passing out this information and, conveying this information absolutely in outreach situations. But I wouldn't do it, I would do it both. I don't make assumptions about what parents know, or they might recognize it when you say it, but they might not actually know. Most parents think children are reading when they are decoding, so they concentrate on the sounding out of the words. They don't realize how important vocabulary and background knowledge are for comprehension. And, you can't just at third grade all of a sudden start with understanding. That also starts at birth. So I think that it just helps them get a rounded out view of what goes into reading.
Yes. One other question I thought we might be able to address at this time from Melissa. She says, even when we ask parents to stay for story time, they still leave or naturally drift away from where we are sitting.
If you give name tags to children, I'd give name tags to the adults, so that helps them feel part of the story time. I also will make sure that the parents have a role to play in the story time. So if you're doing Eensy Weensy Spider, do it all together, but then I have the children be the spiders and the adults be the spout and the sun and the rain, so that there's actually a role for them to play. If we're doing, for example, Jump Frog Jump, then I have the children say Jump Frog Jump, and kind of tap their thighs for Jump Frog Jump. But then I also have the parents say, how did the frog get away? And then the children are responding, Jump Frog Jump. So if you give the parents an actual role to play, and if they come to expect that, then they're more likely, I think, to stay because they realize they are part of the story time.
Yeah, and I see Melissa followed that up with a comment that they have even children that are very young who are being dropped off unattended, and I think that might be a topic for a webinar at a future time, but I do sympathize. I've worked in a situation where we would often have very young children and siblings taking care of siblings, but
yeah,
that is just a difficult situation with a completely different approach. So I don't know how much of this information is really for that type of audience.
Yeah, the other thing is that as you say, that's a whole kind of another issue, but also when a 10-year-old is bringing a 3-year-old, we found out that those 10-year-olds are pretty darn smart, and we will convey information to the older siblings as well, so that they also pick up on ways to share read books and reading with their younger brothers or sisters, and because they're often the ones that are doing it at home. So I don't think we should discount their role. We need to, they feel very proud when they're helping their children.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So I think it's only fair to acknowledge what they do and to kind of, give them the tools to do it even better.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, thank you. I think that we got everybody's comments, but again, as we proceed through today's webinar, please feel free to continue submitting questions through the chat box, and we'll just address those as we go along.
Okay. And then the last poll here is for those of you who did have been trying to put in those early literacy tips, what aspects did you feel were somewhat, even if not totally successful, what successes did you notice, or what positive things might you have noticed as part of putting in tips?
And this is another case where I'll say no, there's no such thing as a too small of a success. So
That's right.
There are some days where just sitting down and having the time to thoughtfully reflect on how to put a story time together, or where to even find new resources. I think that's a success all in its own. I know how busy everyone's days are, and even trying to find time to attend a webinar is incredibly tricky some days. So, all right. Great. Someone asked me.
Good, yeah. See how they're saying that makes sense. So that's the one where they're intuiting it, like they recognize it when you say it, and they say, oh, that makes sense. So that's really good. At the a study that was done in Idaho State, they did they looked at, they actually had two groups of story times, one where they said the tips and one where they didn't. And in both groups, there were adults who were already doing, the things that were done in the story time. But for the parents that weren't doing it, they changed when they had the tips. There were two things that made them change their behaviors. One was that the librarian made it look fun. The librarian made it look doable. So that was one. And the second was, second motivation was, now I understand why it's important, so I'm going to do it. So I think that was, that study showed that, it can make a difference.
I see some other comments. One of the best outcomes I've had that comes to mind is when I had an early literacy tip about singing books of songs that they know, and all the books I had for checkout were snapped up.
Wow,
Fantastic.
that's so great.
That's a fantastic one. Yeah, and then related with more songs, I use an introductory song that includes names of children and their adults. Whoever submitted that, you have to put a link to your song in the chat. So I love that. Circling back to the chat, Janet asks, what was the name of the study with two story times with and without tips? Can you repeat that, Saroj?
It was done through Idaho State Library. I can probably find it on their website. It's under the Read to Me link on their website.
Okay, yeah, we'll look that up and send that out on the listserv later.
Okay.
Fantastic. Another comment, I used the book Nanette Spaghetti recently with children at an outreach and was able to really delve into talking about asking them if they had heard of these words. It was fun to play with the words and rhymes throughout the story using vocabulary.
Yay!
Absolutely.
and yes, and the next one is on using scissors. Yes, way to go, really helping those muscles for writing skills.
Yes,
That's
yes.
great.
I still tell a story all the time when I was at an elementary school and I had a class of 3rd and 4th graders, and they did not know how to use scissors.
Yeah.
So many of them. Let's see. One more comment. I was afraid of, I guess it was a tip, appearing clunky and out of place or a quote-unquote Captain Obvious moment. But I have a parent that's very knowledgeable on the subject, and she said it was smooth and showed that the things we do at Storytime is purposeful. Yay! Having your advocate. Yeah, a Storytime champion. No, that's important.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so let's move on and see how we can make it easier for people. So sharing tips with the early literacy tips during our story times. And I've gotten down to less than 20 seconds, making it an effective tip and that kind of when we format. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Just to kind of recap, what is an effective tip is one that connects the activity like guessing a word, clapping syllables, acting out a story, or the practices, sing, talk, read, write, or play, to the early literacy component and then to later reading. So let's see how that might work. I just wanted, you had this over a year ago, but I just wanted to review it quickly here because this is going to help you with kind of connecting the dots. So by 3rd grade, so we're talking now about the formal reading process, successful readers have to have 2 skill areas. They have to be able to decode, learn the code, sound out the words, sight words, that's learning the code or breaking the code. And they have to be able to comprehend, so they have to be able to understand the meaning. So if I give you this word, quote unquote word, because when you were young you didn't know that those letters actually represented sounds, then you couldn't really read this word. But if I were to tell you, okay, the pound sign is the B sound, the dollar sign is the A sound, and the colon sign is the T sound, then you can read the word, bat. Okay? So that's decoding. Okay? Now, if you can decode Leah is hippo when she rocks with her mom, you decoded that sentence. But what does it mean? So we might guess, like the children looking at the picture, hippo means happy and rofs means read. So Leah is happy when she rofs or reads with her mom. But if we have this picture, then the meaning might change again. Leah is helpful when she cooks with her mom or bakes with her mom. So the fact, even if you can decode, you don't really understand unless you know the meanings of the words. So you need both of these skill areas to become a successful reader. And of course, early literacy leading up to that reading process is what children know about reading and writing before they can actually read and write. So let's look at those skills. So in order to support decoding, they have to have print awareness. They have to notice print. They have to know letter names and sounds, and they have to hear the smaller sounds and words, and know words. So the more words that a child knows, the easier it will be for them to decode, like with carrot, C-A-R-R-O-T. So they might say car rot, but they keep sounding it out until they glom on to a word that they know, in this case, carrot. But if they had never heard the word carrot, they're going to keep on going. So the more words a child has heard, the easier it will also be for them to decode. And of course, these other skills are concentrating on the text. Comprehension, again, straddles both of these, knowing the meanings of words, as we saw with Hipple and Roths, but also they have to have that background knowledge. Like you knew that a smile means happy usually, or that you read a book. You knew what it was when they were cooking, okay? So here you can have the comprehension. These are then the early literacy skills that support these areas of later reading. So when you go back and you look at, for example, let me take you back to the effectiveness of here. So when we're looking at the activity is relating to one of the early literacy components, and then that leads to either decoding or comprehension. So you can see the kind of orange and the blue showing those connections. Okay? So then I'll take you back now to the tips, because then that is going to help you make those connections. So you have here also from a year ago and also today, Charlie put up this summary of the early literacy components so that you can make the connection between the activity and the early literacy skill. If you have any questions or comments on those connections, you can go ahead and type them into the chat box there, and then I'm going to go ahead on, but you can go ahead and type in any questions you have in trying to make those connections between the activity and early literacy. What I'd like to do now is look at this when we format. So the when we format is kind of an easy, I think, a kind of conversational way to share information connecting the early literacy activity and how it helps children, and then it explains the skill and makes the connection to later reading. So just for a little example, when we're connecting the skills, that when we structure. So when we help have a rhyming book and point out the rhymes, it helps children hear the smaller sounds in words. When they hear the smaller sounds in words, that will help them later sound out words when they learn to read. Okay, so that would be just like a little tip of making that connection. And then if you have the handout of the PowerPoint presentation, you'll see these other little examples. So, and I always say adults, like I kind of call out when I'm doing the tip, I kind of start with adults. So right before I sing a song or after I sing a song, or it could be like if I'm singing the song twice, so I sing it once and then have this tip and then say, I'll sing it again together, like that. So I say, adults, when we sing with our children, there's a distinct note for each syllable, so they hear the smaller sounds and words. This helps them become a good reader because they need to hear those smaller sounds and words in order to sound out words when they learn to read. So singing with your children helps them get ready to read. Let's sing our song again. Okay. I have a little video clip here from that would just show maybe how it could look a little bit. So Charlie's going to put this up.
Thank you for your patience for integrating a new piece of technology into our webinar software. So as always with new technology, there's sometimes a few small hiccups, so just bear with us and give us a few moments. This might be a really great opportunity if, over in the chat, if anybody has some favorite tips that they have tried, please enter those into the chat to share with everyone. Or conversely, if there is maybe a certain type of tip or piece of information you're wanting to share, but you don't know quite how to put it into a tip that flows, maybe this would be a great time to ask that while we prep the video.
Okay, and the video will be on print awareness, but I can also go ahead and share some tips with you about, for example, letter knowledge. So when we talk about shapes with our children, we help them notice shapes. And because children begin to recognize letters by their shapes, we're developing their letter knowledge, which will later help them sound out words when they learn to read. Or let's say for vocabulary, you explain a word. Like here in this book, the wonderful book, it has the word scampered. So we wouldn't replace that word with run, so they ate their dinner and scampered away. But I might also go like this. So they ate their dinner and they scampered away. They ran away. So when we explain a word, rather than replace a hard word with an easier one, we're helping children learn new words. This helps build their vocabulary, which will later help them understand what they read. So you see, you're kind of connecting the dots between the activity, which is explaining the word, relating it to vocabulary or learning new words. You can use that. You can use the term or not. And then it helps them what? With comprehension. It helps them understand what they'll read.
That's one of my favorite new tips. And I also like its connection to critical thinking. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah. When we read factual books with our children, they're learning about the world around them. The information they learn builds their background knowledge, which will later help them understand what they read. Remember, you don't have to read the whole book. So if you're sharing a book on butterflies or bees or, whatever might be of interest. Another one is when we do finger plays, developing their small motor kinds of things, that helps with writing. So you might say, that would be, let's say you've just done a finger play. When we do these finger plays with children, we're having fun, but we're also helping them develop their small muscle coordination, which they'll need to write. So that's a first step to writing. So I think that those are all ways that we can kind of make those connections through that when we. Then the people who are already doing these things, they know, okay, when I do this, it's going to help with later reading. Those people who aren't doing it will know that, oh, well, when I will do it, it will help. So, and I think it doesn't feel too condescending or preachy. It's because we're all in it together.
Absolutely. Great tips. Thank you. And at this time, we are ready to share the YouTube video.
Okay.
I believe
Okay.
that's the
So
end of
that
our
just gives
video.
you a little bit of an idea of how it might look as you try to incorporate a when we tip. These other slides are just more of the ones that I already read. So in terms of developing the tip, of course, you don't have to use the when we format. I'm just introducing it as another option. Make sure that you're saying it in your own way. The tips do have to be effective. We do want, in other words, if you just say singing will help your child learn to read, that doesn't really make sense, So connecting the dots really helps them understand the connection. In terms of the process of it, one thing that I do is I like to write down what I'm going to say, and then I say it to see how it feels. Because you know what? The way we write and the way we talk are different. So I write it down to get an idea of what I want to say, but then I say it, and I frankly don't necessarily say it the way I wrote it. And then I rewrite it the way I said it. So then that just makes it a little bit more conversational than the first writing of it. So that just it looks like on these slides that I'm reading what I wrote, but I actually wrote what I said. So that's another way to make sure that it can be a little bit more conversational. Okay, have a little, Alexa here is saying, I often use a flannel board to do matching. I'll put up a red mitten with a star, and then I will say, whoever has the matching mitten can bring it up and put it up and make the match. Is there an early literacy tip that I can use with that? Yes, and actually the more detailed the differences are, the differences might be harder to see, then the more challenging it is. But the connection here between matching or noticing how things are alike and different goes to letter knowledge. So if you notice like a lowercase n and a lowercase h, the only difference in those two letters, how they look, is the height of the line. So children have to be able to notice how things are alike and different visually, okay? And, matching games are a great way, visual matching games are a great way to help them make that connection. So I would just do, for example, when we play matching games with our children, that helps them notice how things are visually alike or different. And they have to notice differences in similar letters, how they look, in order for them to learn letters, and that will later also help them as they're trying to sound out words as they learn to read. So that would be a tip that could go with matching. I want to emphasize that even though we're making these connections between the skills and reading, we are not turning our story times into classrooms. One of the great things about the public library is that we are part of informal learning. We do not test the children. We do not test the adults. We want them all to feel comfortable in our environments. But I think it's important that we are part of informal education and lifelong learning. So by making these connections in enjoyable ways, we are fulfilling that mission. I'm going to now give you, it's interesting that Alexa brought up a flannel board activity. What I'm going to do is give you this flannel board activity that I have done in the story time. And one of your assignments is going to be to write an early literacy tip about this for the next webinar. And then we'll have, we'll just see what you all come up with. So I'm going to first explain what I do here for the flannel board activity. So, for example, let's see. All right. So the first thing I do, this is coming up all together, but actually the first thing I do is I put up these two triangles. I put up a red triangle and a blue triangle. And I say, oh, okay, we're going to have some fun on the flannel board. I'm putting up a red triangle and a blue triangle. And I'm going to hand out a circle to each of the children. Okay, and each child will come up and put up a circle on the flannel board. So let's say one person comes up and they put up this gray circle. And I'll say, oh, Jessica, would you put your circle below the red triangle? Good job. And then we all clap for her. And then another person comes up, another child comes up. Nathan, you put your green circle between the two triangles. Yay! And so forth. Okay? So now we have here, we've looked with shapes and we've looked at words about spatial relationships. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to think about any connection that you want to make between this activity and early literacy, and for your homework you will be writing out an early literacy tip for this flannel board activity. In your handouts at the end of the session, there are a lot of tips as part of the handouts that might help you. Okay? And now I'm going to put up a slide here which will have all of your homework assignments. So the first one I think will be helpful to you, and that is if you want to watch some more video clips of early literacy tips. There are about 10 of them on my website, and this is the URL for them, okay? And then you can, you don't have to watch any of them if you don't want to. It's just that they're there if it would be helpful for you. You can watch as many or as few as you want. This assignment is for everybody where you're writing that early literacy tip for that flannel board activity. Then I would also like you to write another early literacy tip using something from one of your story times, okay? So you can be a book, it can be a song, it can be a flannel board, it can be something you do with a puppet, something where you tell a story. It can be anything you want in any of your story times. You're going to choose one item and you're going to write an early literacy tip for it. It can have the when we format or it doesn't have to. It's up to you, okay? Now, as Krista is saying right here in the chat here, that there's a what will I say form, which is also similar to the one I already gave you last year. And also those early literacy tips are on there to give you plenty of choices of things to do. Do not feel tied to the wording on those handouts. You're going to make the wording your own and just try it, okay? If you like, you can try it out on a colleague or your spouse or a volunteer or another parent, and just say, I'm taking this class on saying these early literacy tips. Do you mind if I just tell you this and see how it sounds? Just kind of give yourself a chance to make it work. And then the last one is, in what ways other than story times might you be able to share early literacy information with parents and caregivers? So that's just more like a little brainstorm of as you're becoming more comfortable with the early literacy information, where else besides story times would you like to share this information? Okay, so that's the assignment. Okay, and then I'm going to turn it over to the others for the future here.
Thank you, Saroj. This is Charlie. So the next webinars where you're going to present, where Saroj is going to present for us and you'll be bringing your homework, are part 2 of this webinar series. We'll be offering it 3 times, either on March 9th, March 14th, or March 23rd. Those are all going to start at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. So just choose one of those 3 if you have not already, and you'll email your homework to me 24 hours before the date of that part 2 webinar, because we'll be compiling it and looking it over before the webinar, and I've just put my email address into the chat, but you'll be getting lots of emails from me. So these are going to be limited in size. So if you know that you can only get to one of them, you're going to want to register for them very quickly. So, all right.
And I just want to say one thing is that you can also like put the tips into a transition, you know, like as you're starting the book or as you're passing out shakers or, you know, as I mentioned before, you're like doing it between two singings of the song. So I think as you get a little bit more comfortable with it, you'll see that you can make it kind of transition in. In fact, sometimes it can be so conversational as to disappear, and that's why I say adults, you know, just to kind of give them a heads up so that it doesn't just totally disappear. So anyway, that's just another thought as you're writing the tips, also just kind of thinking about, well, you know, when am I actually going to put them in? Sometimes I put a little Post-it on the back of the book or, you know, the flannel board just so that I don't forget to say what I want to say. The other thing I'll do is I'll write the early literacy tip, excuse me, right on a flip chart or a whiteboard. It doesn't take the place of actually saying it, but it's a little nice crutch to remember what to say, and the adults can also look at it. A lot of adults kind of look at that whiteboard even as I walk in, as they're walking in, right at the beginning of story time to see what I'm going to talk about today. I have a question here. Is our early literacy tip for the flannel board activity meant to be one we come up with, or are we to use the circles and triangles with our own tip? Yes, please use for one part of your assignment is to use my triangle and circle. You know, pretend you were doing that in your story time. What tip could you give? And the reason I'm doing that is so that we all have one common thing that we can discuss that we've all done together. Then the second assignment, the second piece is choose one thing from any of your story times. So if you want, you could choose a flannel board activity of your own, or you can choose a book or a song or anything you want from any of your story times. So the flannel board activity that I'm giving you here is so that we have one common thing to talk about, and then the one where you're doing your own, early literacy item, your own storytime contact item. That one is so that you will have something that you feel comfortable with. You feel, you feel at ease with. You love that book or that song or that activity, so you're choosing something of your own. So you're going to be writing two asides. You're writing two asides. One for my flannel board activity, one for something of yours.
Thank you very much, Saroj. I want to move, we'll come back for the questions that have just come in. I want to move through the information that we have here at the end of our webinar. We can get the handouts available to you all as well. Just wanted to encourage you guys to definitely sign up for Kayak, our young adult youth services listserv that Krista moderates. So if you haven't already signed up for this, the instructions are going to be in the PDF. They're here. They'll be in the PDF of the slides that we'll make available in just a moment. We also have some related resources that you can check out on your own time. These are things that are available from our collection. Check out those links, and you can get them through Interlibrary Alone from us. Don't forget to follow us on social media. And a couple of Save the Date webinars. I'm not going to read through all of these except to say look out for the one on Thursday, April 6th. It's our next School Ready Libraries link up. It's an introduction to hands. That's, again, at the same time, 1 o'clock on Thursday, April 6th, so definitely save the date for that one. And also, big announcement, too.
Big announcement! Surprise! Hey!
Saroj is back again.
She's back again, yes. So, as you all know, we're really excited. Last spring, it seemed like there was a lot of things coming out. We had Saroj in Kentucky, then we had our first module, and then things were really quiet for a while. And that was because we had to do some revisions to the grant because of things with the state budget that were going on, but it actually worked out really, really well. And we are thrilled to bring Saroj back for another series of story times. In-person, all-day workshops, up to 6 hours of continuing education credit. So we will be going on our next tour of Kentucky this summer. So it'll be almost kind of, maybe we'll try to do a summer reading party at each little spot too. So, wrapping up summer reading, and then these will be all about integrating that trend that Saroj talked about at the beginning of the webinar, STEM, science and math for everyone, exploring science and math concepts through story time. So there will be 5 locations this time, so it will be a little bit more limited than our last road trip, but we are going further into the state. So we will be visiting the McCracken County Public Library on August 23rd, Louisville Free Public Library, I believe at their Southwest Regional Branch on August 25th, the Pulaski County Public Library on August 28th, Pikeville Public Library, very excited to get out to that part of the state on August 30th, and then finishing up in Moorhead at the Rowan County Public Library on August the 31st. So again, just be thinking about, start asking your supervisors to hold those dates for you, and we will be releasing registration probably next month.
Absolutely.
Okay, and Jennifer asked, how many aside should you give in a story time? I like to give 3, but I would say if you're not doing any, start with 1. So I like to especially give like an example of when we're actually doing something, like with a rhyming book and so forth. And then at the end of the story time, I like to give them an idea of something they can do even after story time is over that supports the skills. So those are the first 2 that I think you could try to concentrate on. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
No worries. And so again, coming up, hopefully pending any technical difficulties, the second of our 3 school-ready libraries modules will be released. These again are all background knowledge, research, information, and reflection activities about the 5 domains associated with Kentucky school readiness definition, and I will again just link to that handout from the Governor's Office of Early Childhood over in the chat. Module 1 reviewed cognitive development. Module 2 will be reviewing 2 more domains, physical well-being, as well as social emotional development, which is a really, really, really hot topic in professional literature to do with children's and youth services. So please keep an eye out for that. We will provide the links again when they go live, hopefully in another week. Also, we are looking to get more of your feedback. We mentioned that we did some revisions with the grant budget and resources, and we just want to be able to see what will best serve you and your library's needs. So please visit the link in the survey. It's only going to be open for about another week. It will close on March 8th. So provide us with some feedback about the types of educational manipulatives that you might like to use in your story times or during those learn to play sessions, or just to have out as part of your general library's design and environment. We would love to see what will best help you. So please complete that survey, and we'll send out reminders on Kayak.
And we are, excuse me, coming to the end of our webinar. The handouts for the homework assignment for part 2 of these webinars are all available in the downloads pod in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. The first download that's there is the full PDF of today's slides that you can download, and the other ones that start with the number 2, those are all related to your homework assignment for the next week. So you can go ahead and download those now. I'll also include them in the follow-up email from today's class in case you can't get them from today. Don't forget to email me your homework assignments 24 hours prior to that part 2 webinar. I appreciate that. And I think we're coming to the end, so thank you very much to Saroj for being here with us.
Thank you, one and all.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. We hope you enjoyed it. It looks like good feedback. We had lots of good discussion.
All right, yeah, we'll hang around. We'll be stopping the recording, but we will hang around to take just any last questions or comments in the chat box. And we look forward to seeing you throughout the several training opportunities for the rest of the month. Have a great day.
Thank you all. And if you have any questions about the homework or about how the next webinar is going to go, please feel free to email me any questions. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much, Saroj.
Sure. Thank you all.